Øivind, you just came off a really interesting panel about value creation in the energy services industry. And so if people who are here, or maybe people who didn't make it to this event, have one takeaway from that panel, what is it that you think they need to know?
I think, value creation needs to happen through the whole value chain of any development. And I think keeping that transparency and really working in partnerships across the value chain is going to be fundamental to all development we want to do, whether it's in the energy space or, significant infrastructure development. So to have good transparency, provide line of sight and work in partnership, that is what's going to create everyone the winner.
So making sure that everybody's on the same page and aligned with what that outcome needs to be.
Yeah, holding ourselves accountable to our own performance, be clear about what we need from the supply chain community, and provide line of sight when we can, so that we can all work from a position of resilience and sort of stability fundamentally. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that line of sight. I mean, deepwater oil and gas is becoming an increasingly important part of the supply stack. And at the same point, we at Rystad Energy do see the potential for cost increases. And so how can suppliers, operators work together to minimize that? What can be done to address that trend?
Yeah, so I think you're right. We see as well, and that's why we strategically, we really focused on the deep water space. That's where we see the finds of scale, and that scale is what gives the best underlying economics, whether it's on the cost per barrel or emission per barrel as well, from our trilemma. So that is one point. And then we need to work on pace, because pace outweighs capex growth.
Okay.
So delivery certainty and reliability in performance is really what makes the economics go around. So even if you see a bit of a capex increase over the last few years, which you have, working in, as I said earlier, working in partnership across the supply chain, getting it right the first time. We subscribe to a standardisation philosophy that is proving very successful, but that means as well we reduce a risk all along the value chain of our suppliers up to our end client. And that way you're managing, you have a very good visibility on what your costs going to be. You have a very good visibility at what time you will start to produce oil and at what level you produce oil. And then you have a very good control on the equation that creates the value for the development. So, solid fundamentals in the development, transparency across the value chain, and reliability and accelerated delivery. That's where you make the economics go around.
Well, I'm going to ask you to dust off your crystal ball here just a little bit. But if we're looking out at potential final investment decisions, how many could we maybe see through the end of this year, or maybe by the end of next year?
Yeah, so I can't speak on behalf of the IOCs, but we know what's in the market today. As soon there is several prospects in Brazil. There is live prospects in Namibia. And, whether they go to FID this year or the next, or whether they will be final awards made. But, what we see is a very buoyant market. I think looking back for the last decade, this is the best period we've seen, which I think is as well a testament that these developments of scale are the ones that will go, because they also provide fundamental needs to the energy equation. So is the economics and also the energy equation of the world and the countries in question. So, we're excited about Guyana still, and Brazil will still be at least 50% of the deep water market, at least the way we see it in the coming years. So there is a lot to choose from, and I'm sure that some will make FID in the coming months and year.
What do you think could be key to unlocking some of those decisions? What might operators need to see to move ahead, do you think?
There is to have a good approach to risk sharing.
Okay.
We all carry the risks that we can manage. If we try to transfer risks across the fence, and then that will be inflating costs. So that is one aspect. Contract structures that allow for optimized financing costs.
Okay.
Financing cost has gone up quite a lot in the oil development space over the last years. So we see an evolution of contract structures where there is more that goes on the balance sheet of the IOCs rather than historically in the lease structures. So that is helping the economics as well. So there are several elements, and as I said, fast decision making, good solid execution, reliability in delivery. That is always the fundamentals that need to be satisfied. So I'd like to say it plays well to our value proposition.
And now, you mentioned Brazil, you mentioned Guyana, hotspots obviously for FPSO development. But are there areas maybe that you're keeping an eye on that could surprise to the upside?
Well, we're really hopeful to see the first development materialize in Namibia. We're seeing there's a lot of promising exploration work there. Obviously, we are in a position to talk about some of them, talk to the developers of some of these, and we're hoping that they can make the economics work and that Namibia will become a future great market. I think we also see a tendency in West Africa that there is more proactiveness from governments to look at past licensing conditions and create a more stimulated market for exploration, and also maybe bring some of the developments that have been stalled for a while back into play through changed economics and let's call it production sharing agreement structure. So I thinking West Africa is going to be an exciting place to follow in the next years.
And we're certainly seeing additional activity in West Africa as well, both from the exploration standpoint as well as development. But you mentioned emissions earlier on in the conversation, and we're seeing a lot of different technologies that are available to help decarbonize FPSO operations. But it all comes down to what are people willing to pay for? And so where do you see as the most promising avenues to lower emissions moving ahead from a customer standpoint?
Yeah, so one of the more significant investments that we've made in strategic investments that we made over the last years is to modularize the carbon capture technology.
Okay.
And we've worked that, and we brought in Mitsubishi Heavy Industries as a partner with their technology, and created a modular design that we can integrate on new FPSOs. So that is, to capture the carbon from the emissions of our gas turbine power plant. That will have a significant impact on the emission footprint of an FPSO operation. So, we put that out to the market now. Today, there isn't a carbon market per se to put value on that incremental capex and offset that capex. So let's see if there is a global alignment on the carbon market, or as new developments occur, whether the legislators in the respective countries will take a more progressive stance, or whether the IOCs themselves will also take a different point of view. The technology is there; we can reduce significantly, but we need to look at it holistically. So we also understand that the operators may offset elsewhere at a lower cost per ton, and therefore go that route. So what our job is to provide the technology to the market, and that we do.
Yeah, provide those options.
Exactly.
Well, I want to look even a little further forward when it comes to decarbonization. Recently, SBM, I think you received preliminary approval for a design of a blue ammonia FPSO. And so tell us a little bit about where you see kind of the use case, and maybe when we might see one of these vessels on the water.
Yeah, so I'll go back to what is the strategy of SBM today. So we're following a decarbonize and diversify. So we work from what is our core today, which is building FPSOs. An FPSO has many building blocks, and power generation, gas injection, water treatment, water injection, etc. If you take some of those building blocks and you add in our carbon capture, you could create power barges with carbon capture, for instance, as a diversification journey. The other thing we see, and what we've been working on, is are we going to see ammonia as a fuel? Yes or no? So historically, SBM came up through loading buoys, and we have about half of the loading buoys in the world. They are SBM made.
Wow.
And that technology, or the loading solution, is something we see. If ammonia is going to become a fuel, there will be a need for loading buoys, because normally you wouldn't want to load ammonia in port. Yeah. So we've upgraded our loading buoy, and from there we're also exploring the ammonia play a bit in terms of products that we could have for the future. And today there is a lot of non-valorized gas in offshore fields that are being injected. Is there a way of valorizing this gas by turning it into ammonia? So we've worked on technology to do that, and to see whether there is a real value proposition. This is early stages. So today it's a technology play. Today there isn't in the near term an ammonia market yet.
No.
So it's a bit of a readiness and a bit to play around with our diversification journey, when we put our different building blocks of know-how today and capabilities into different configurations. So
No, and that was a key part of that panel, was that need to innovate and that need to make sure that you're one step ahead of where the market is going.
Absolutely. So we are in the privileged position with many of the operators, and we dialogue with them on what the future markets could be, and we would like to be their a partner in whatever energy mix they are driving in tomorrow's market. So we try to have strategic thinking with them, and to see where that leads us. So that's our pioneering journey.
Yeah, when the future gets there, hopefully you're already at that destination. So
that's the plan. Not to finance it, not to gamble, but to be ready for the markets as they materialize, playing on our core strengths.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the Debrief, and I hope I can look forward to having a conversation with you at the summit here next year.
Let's hope for that. It's been very nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.